everyone, welcome back to Alkaline Hydroxide 784. I may be alkaline, but the rain coming down is increasingly acidic and destroying things. The sun is becoming increasingly unbearable as we on the AC that ends up contributing to the problem. The seas threaten to engulf our shores with every passing day. Oh, okay, sorry. So anyways, today we'll be looking at the thing that affects our past, present, and future. And that is, of course, climate change, the second topic for this theme. So we'll be seeing how climate change has had a significant impact on history, or at least like what are the impacts that it's having currently right now. So as we all kind of know that we know what climate change is, but we need to actually clarify something before we move on because generally if I say climate change, you're going to associate it with humans doing bad stuff, the environment, and yes, that is part of what causes climate change. But the term climate change is actually pretty generic, and the climate has always been changing. Change is the only constant, and what we would call this is climate variability, and this has literally changed the earth and made it what it is today. Earth started off as a hot volcano land with lots of magma and lots of gases spewing into the atmosphere. This eventually cooled down, and some organisms, first anaerobic, then aerobic organisms, started appearing, and they became plants. And there's suddenly a lot of oxygen in the atmosphere, and there's also animals that came around, and some really big ones because of all the oxygen. And there's a period a lot of oxygen and everything was really big, a period where the overgrowth of plants led to animal extinction, no joke, and a period where a meteorite devastated the dinosaurs and allowed the mammals to flourish, a period or two of ice age, and more until we reach the modern age. As you can see, all of these are examples of stuff that causes or is part of climate change. But instead of calling it climate change, we generally call it climate variability because this is part of the natural course of events that happens on Earth. But even a natural change in climate has had a huge role in sculpting history and leading it to today, where we ourselves are directing the sculpting, though we seem to be a bit lost with the role of sculpting. So just take note that climate change occurs regardless of human activities. However, even though natural climate change has had many impacts on the past history of Earth, I dare say it's human-created climate change that's bound to affect the present and future. So let's focus on that for now. I mean, I don't think I actually included any natural stuff, so I don't have to worry about that. So whenever I talk about climate change or I'm talking about the impacts, I'm actually kind of referring more to changes that were caused by humans. So yeah, at the end of the day, I'm going back to that. Okay, let's go. So first off, I could first, cover the so-called anti-argument, the dumb argument that people might have that climate change isn't real, but that's kind of already false. So let's look at a different argument which I randomly came up with. And because, as I mentioned earlier, climate change is a thing even without humans in the past. So you could look at it in a way that human made climate change was just part of fate. Like, just it was meant to be a thing because humans came up and then we created this problem. And we can't just blatantly dismiss it. But the problem with this argument is the fact that humans are now trying to also prevent the climate change from happening or becoming worse is also part of the fate. So this argument doesn't really make a lot of sense. Anyways, let's move on to the actual important stuff. So the first and most obvious way climate change affects history is by changing the environment in ways that change the destinies of land masses and the biosphere that they contain. So first off, we have global warming, which is one of the main things that people talk about. So increased temperatures have a variety of effects on animals, and this can be as straightforward as higher temperatures leading to higher ratios of female turtles because the temperature of the sand determines the male-female ratio of turtles born. And if like in Ingram Island, 99% of turtles become female, then the turtles will probably become extinct just from being unable to breed. Or this can be more indirect, like algal bloom becoming more common as water temperatures increase, which block light and oxygen diffusion to deeper parts of water and suffocating the fishes below. Or we can even talk about how higher temperatures mean more evaporation of water, which it messes up rainfall over different regions, or how forest fires in Australia are devastating forests there. Look, there's a lot to talk about, and you can also find new examples just by searching online. And another thing also caused kind of by global warming is the changes that we see in the La Nina and El Nino. You know what I'm talking about? These inadvertently cause droughts in some places and monsoons and flooding in other places. Like for example, I think a few years ago we also had a lot of rain and India was receiving a lot of flooding and stuff like that during the monsoon season. And they affect or are affected by sea temperatures. Did I mention I mean, sea temperatures also affect stuff like coral bleaching in the Great Reef, which I haven't mentioned yet, so that's another thing. So all of these things are affected by increased temperature. So apart from La Nina, just the raining part, it also increases the chances of natural disasters occurring, which can cause a lot of damage to wildlife as much as it does to us people. And at the same time, the increased temperature will have icebergs melting, which causes sea levels to rise, which can engulf coastlines and their rich biodiversity. More on country impacts later. Yeah, so basically, sea levels rising, lots of other bad things happening. It's the problems with global warming. But climate change isn't just global warming. There's also stuff like carbon dioxide dissolving in the oceans, and that makes it too acidic for our calcium carbonate users like the crustaceans and trilobites. Actually, I don't know. Anyways, there are some organisms that use calcium carbonate to grow. I think even oysters use it to grow. And when that gets dissolved, it's not good for them. At the same time, apparently I mean this is just a random FYI. The higher acidity of the ocean can make lightning strikes more intense. But I'm not sure how big of a deal this is. It's just a weird FYI. So apart from acidic oceans, we have something called acid rain. And this can also in turn, if the rain falls in freshwater places as well, it can affect the fishes in there or the other organisms in there, as well in the ocean, the acidic oceans affect other marine life as well, which then affects the animals eating them, and so on and so forth. And you get the point. So apart from that, well, climate change is also continuing to influence evolution. For example, I mentioned the corals that were bleaching, and if the coral gets bleached, it will usually die or just be permanently stressed out. But some of them are now resistant to bleaching and and end up returning back to their normal state after that period of stress. And this provides the final hope we have for them. Likewise, many animals also start adapting to new environments. Migration to another environment, or maybe the current environment changes through climate change. So they start adapting to new environments. And apparently, humans will also undergo evolution in the long term, which has some possible interesting effects. Like, maybe humans will all end up migrating to more denser regions, and that could end up leading to more interbreeding and leading everyone to end up becoming less diverse in the long term because of the skin colors mingling and everything becoming similar skin color in the end. I'm not sure how true it's gonna be, but that's one article that literally told that. Okay, so next up, let's look at geopolitics, which is the second big point. And in geopolitics, we can first look at the international cooperation over climate change. You see the usual trend of countries promising to do stuff, but not really living up to their promises. You see countries like Kiribati and Tuvalu worried about being completely submerged by sea levels. You see Greta Thunberg being simultaneously praised for bringing up climate change and lambasted for being all talk, no action. You do realize some governments are also all talk, no action. Anyways, the problem is that while yes, climate change is such a big issue that will affect all of us if we don't do anything, governments have a few problems with keeping up. One, they have their own interests, as they always do. Two, they have problems acquiescing to public sentiment, which could be the case for stuff like nuclear power or something like that. And three, they have financial problems or a lack of support slash guidance for the projects, which could lead to unsafe projects or could lead to just delays in things happening. So, what's the consequences of this? Well, we see the small islands and less emissive countries receiving the biggest threat of climate change. You know, Tuvalu, for example. Well, while the richer countries have money to throw on avoiding the problem or at least not doing enough about it. This eventually starts becoming problematic for everyone in the long term and affecting food security, increasing health problems, and just being detrimental. Yeah, so at the same time, like another thing that climate change can cause is conflicts, which is because climate change can cause a decrease in resources and make living conditions of people worse. And that is indeed fertile ground for conflicts. Well, if you want examples, honestly, I'm not sure if the Egypt one counts. I've talked about it already. You can check the episode. But there's one that's it's in my mind, which is the Kaveh river dispute between Tamil Nadu and Karnataka in India. So, according to my mom, this is more of a political problem compared to climate change. But I mean, I still want to talk about it because it's an interesting thing that not a lot of people know about. So, this is actually a long lasting conflict between the two states where Karnataka was not willing to let the river flow into Tamil Nadu. And this can be quite problematic when there's a water crisis. So, for example, in 2019 in Chennai, there was a water crisis, and even though it receives a lot of rain, it doesn't really have a lot of proper infrastructure to collect the rain, and it ended up running out of water that can be used. No joke. And yeah, as I mentioned, it's also due to that lack of infrastructure and just urbanization in general, leading to all the natural water sources being replaced with buildings. Climate change is also kind of making monsoons and droughts more intense than ever, and not exactly helping things here. But anyway, this whole problem is actually more complicated than this and probably deserves its own video. So let's look at other parts of the world. And yeah, actually, if I think about it, a lot of water conflicts are probably related to climate change. And there's water conflicts in places like Africa. There's many civil wars that occur over droughts, and in Middle East there's disputes there, and China, of course, controlling the Mekong Delta to the disadvantage of our Southeast Asian brethren. But now that I think about it, I mean, this is not exactly direct climate change, but it's also somewhat related air pollution, which can also cause trouble. Like, for example, interboundary haze, the thing that we've faced because of Indonesia, farmer fires and stuff. But I don't know, is it really considered climate change or is it just people burning down their farms? But anyways, okay, so the third point that is, caused by climate change is kind of related to Tuvalu or Kiribati being submerged, and that is climate refugees. This usually happens due to submergence or long-lasting flooding of coastal regions, and it's present in parts of Asia as well. So this can result in long-term migration, especially for people who usually fish, because they're the ones who live in the coastal regions generally, and long-term migration inwards into higher density regions, and this can cause problems and also impact the fishing industry, I suppose. So yeah, like the migration can cause trouble as like the density of people in the cities increase, and people in the city will start complaining, and many problems can arise from this in a sense. So that was the second point. The second major point as in geopolitics. The third major point is the impact of impact on the society that we live in. So, first, as mentioned earlier, climate change will eventually lead to more health problems. And this would be stuff like higher chances of certain disease transmission, like malaria and stuff, or even actual pandemic kind of diseases, or more pollution or acidic water entering our bodies, more heat exhaustion from heat waves or frostbite from sudden dips in other regions, increased casualties from natural disasters, and more. And another thing that, also is influenced by health costs that climate change can worsen is, well, in inequality. Medical bills cost money, more so in some countries without subsidies. AC costs money and actually worsens the climate change. Right, like nice and comfortable buildings with temperature control cost money. Sunscreen or other covering stuff can cost money. Going in nice AC cars cost money. And let's face it, not all countries have sufficient aircon public infrastructure, like public transport in a sense. So yeah, it's not fun if you can't afford all of this. So finally, climate change is one of the things appearing on social media. Just like with any other topic, social media both heightens the issue with meaningful discussion and calls for action, at the same time degrades it down into an opinion war which only confuses people and doesn't get anything done. Every new effort in certain countries, genuine or not, is being advertised and sometimes even glorified on social media, whereas some efforts go completely unnoticed because they're done in like very rural areas where there's not much media reach, or like lack of access or awareness of the existence of social media. So yeah, speaking of efforts, let's look at the last point, which is about science slash research slash business, that kind of stuff. So for the important thing that is climate change, we of course needed research first to detect that it exists, then to understand it, then to find ways to combat it. And so in a way, climate change has been one major topic in research, which otherwise we may have used like the time to research other things. Who knows? And in a way, the fact is that we still put resources into trying to see if Mars can be terraformed or if Venus has a speck of hospitable area, especially given the general lack of government funding and space stuff, may be attributed to this urgency that one day we may have to move or die. This has inspired methods like space related stuff, both legitimate and science fiction, that we otherwise wouldn't have heard of as much if climate change wasn't a thing. Another part of this is business. Of course, we have the multitude of startups, each seeking to introduce a radical product from solar panel roads to mycelium buildings slash products to new recycling processes. Some of these would eventually succeed, while others merely generate hype in CNBC or Bloomberg and eventually fizzle out. Some of them positively contribute, while others may actually not be benefiting the situation. Apart from startups, we also have major companies advertising products just to combat the health problems caused by climate change, or products that are supposedly reusable, biodegradable, or stuff like that, which in reality are not so. Speaking of major companies, oil companies surely seem to be on the losing side of things here, right? Now, well, they were the ones that hid information that their business or industry contributes to air pollution and climate change in the first place. Yes, they actually knew it long, long ago, even before major actual scientific research into it was done. And the engineers within the oil companies were the ones who first figured out that, oh no, what we are doing is actually not good for the environment. But because of the higher ups, these engineers were generally made to not reveal the truth, which is kind of sad. And now they're interested in the so-called carbon neutral tax, or biofuel and things like that, in order to appear greener. And they sometimes buy carbon credits to pardon themselves while continuing with their oil business. Yeah, so that sounds like we are being led into the fire pit by big companies. How? So yes, climate change has had a lot of impacts, and of course, a lot of things have allowed it to be the big thing that it is today. And I could have gone into more detail, because but I know that my videos usually go really long because of that. So I believe you can find the details on your own. And in conclusion, I think it's pretty obvious that climate change is a very impactful thing in both the past, the present, and the future. If we don't do anything about it, it'll lead to increased sea levels. It'll lead to everyone just being in, worse condition than we are in today. And yeah, it's about as much as I can say about it. But at the same time, it's quite hard to get people to action because it requires so much cooperation worldwide, which is such a hard thing to do because everyone has their own interests, everyone has their own stuff that they really want to do in the short term, and short term things end up being prioritized over the long term things. And there's also many, fake news. Actually, not necessarily fake news, more like different opinions, different negative negative opinions on stuff that's otherwise considered a good thing, or different or certain positive opinions on the things that are otherwise considered negative, which could impact the decisions of both the public as well as the government. So yeah, I hope you find this video useful. If you did, please press the like button and subscribe. And with that, I would like to say thank you and bye.